Clermont. Joel has literally written a book on mastering the Laravel validation rules. He is the co-host of a Laravel show called No Compromises, and the organizer of Milwaukee PHP. This guy is a machine. He does it all. He is here to talk about how to get unstuck. Please, everybody, loud round of applause for Joel.
Hello there. My name is Joel. I'm a developer. And most days, I say it's pretty good. The ability to take an idea in your head, pair that with a text editor. Notice I didn't name a text editor, but to be able to create an application, maybe even launch a business, it's kind of like this unstoppable feeling. But some days, not so much. Those days where you're staring at the keyboard and you're trying to make something work and it's not working, and you don't know why, and you just feel stuck. You might relate to this. This was just working. Sure, I changed something here, but why did this thing over in this other place of my application stop working? Even worse, I didn't change anything at all, and now I'm getting an error. And there's variations on this, right? Well, it worked on my machine. Now up in production, it's not working so well. Or my tests run, 99% of the time they pass, but every once in a while it fails. So this is not a great feeling. And you can have like a moment of self-doubt. Maybe I'm not that good at this. I thought I was pretty good at this. I've been doing this for a while. I've had this like weird vision in my head, like, maybe I should change career. You know what? Being a landscaper, that sounds pretty nice right about now. And I don't really love the outdoors or manual labor, so I don't know why my brain goes there, but it happens. So I first want to start off by saying you are not alone when this happens. Even people that you look up to, people that will be on this stage today announcing awesome new things, I guarantee you, from time to time, all of us as developers have this feeling where we get stuck. In fact, I was working on this talk a couple months ago, and I captured this tweet. So Laravel Daily, somebody who teaches, publishes on Laravel every single day. Notice steps 3 and 4. Now, he didn't say landscaper, but maybe that's kind of like the same vibe I was having. Super simple bug, but so frustrating when your eyes just can't see it. But on the other hand, it feels pretty good once you figure it out. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The principal goal for this talk, not to avoid getting stuck. I can't do that for you, I'm sorry. But to get better at getting unstuck. And so the next time you're in this mode, you're feeling frustrated, you're questioning your life's choices, you'll have a few extra tools to pull out of the toolbox to try to get out of that mode. And so one of my favorite things about conferences is coming here and kind of sharing war stories with people, things that we got stuck on, and then we got unstuck, and how great that felt, and how amazing we are. So that's the format of this talk. I'm going to share some of those stories today, real life things, how I got unstuck, and kind of some principles that you can take away from that in your projects. And we'll end up with 8 key principles at the end. And really, this talk kind of fits in with a larger mission I have, which is just to help developers of all backgrounds, all skill levels, to level up. That idea of going from just being competent, like you know what you're doing, you can build apps, but to take that next step, to actually feel confident, like I can do this no matter what. So if that looks interesting to you, check out that site, masteringlaravel.io. Now let's dive into our first bug. We're going to cover 4 in total, and think of these each as like a little mystery. So try to spot the bug. I'll show the bug on the screen. I'm not going to point to it right away. You have to figure it out. But we'll kind of walk through the process together and come away with those 8 key principles at the end. So bug number 1, very simple thing. I like to start simple. If somebody was helping out in our Slack community, and just trying to create a model with a factory, getting this big SQL error. Right? So the first thing that kind of can be a little hard about this is because it's a factory, there's all this like faker text, and so your eyes just kind of glaze over this. However, let's focus in. This is the actual error. Column not found, I know what that means, but unknown column 0. Now, if we look at the factory, I don't see a column 0, right? I see string keys to my array, but the error is on the screen, so see if you can spot it. And I look at the way things are laid out. I kind of look for patterns, and my eye didn't catch it right away, and it certainly didn't catch the eye of the developer that came to someone else for help. If we put the two side by side, maybe this helps a little bit. Seeing the error in the context of the factory. Let me narrow it down. It's right where the giant arrow is pointing. That's kind of a hint. But do you see it now? Categories doesn't have an arrow next to it. It has a comma. Now that's kind of a simple mistake. Like, this is easy to fix. But part of me wondered, like, why did it say unknown column 0? What's going on here? Like, we could just fix the error and move on. But this is a teaching moment. Like, let's understand this a little more deeply. Now, in my projects, I use coding standard, where a multi-line array has to have every line on its own, or every value on its own independent line. So if we just apply some formatting, like right away, scanning, something at least jumps out to us. Like, our eye goes to like that, one of these things doesn't belong. My eye first jumps to line 25, but then line 24, I see like these things aren't connected like they should be. But now getting back to that unknown column 0, in PHP, it's gonna help us out. These two values that we didn't provide a key for, it's going to numerically index those. And so there's the mystery unknown column 0. Now, maybe you saw that error right away on the first slide. Awesome. The thing with being stuck, though, is sometimes you're just so laser focused on the wrong thing, you can't see it. So let's look at some of the principles now. The first one, pay attention to formatting. Like, we have these editors that put things in different colors and use different fonts and different spacing, and like, it all means something. So pay attention to that. Apply formatting standards. Like, generally, I wouldn't say code formatting ever fixes a bug, but in this example, it might help you find the bug more quickly. A second principle, it seems kind of simple, but read the whole error message. Now, I'm going to demonstrate why, and I kind of led you down a path by highlighting just the beginning on that first slide, but we do this sometimes. We get to a point where we think we know what's happening, we think we got to the relevant bit of information, and we kind of gloss over the rest. But if I actually had read this whole error message, two things would have popped out to me. First of all, there's two fields that have an issue, right? So I have a 0 and a 1. This is the list of columns in the SQL insert statement that failed. But these are also positional, right? So the two problem columns I know come right after slug and right before meta title. So even if I had 100 lines in my factory, I would know right where to zero in. So this is a very important technique. And principle 3, we didn't really use this one in this particular problem, but it's a good plan B if everything else doesn't work, is try to simplify the problem. That factory had 13 lines in it. Not all of those fields required a value. So maybe like strip out everything to get to the bare minimum. Does the problem still happen? If it does, maybe now you only have 5 or 6 columns to look at. And if it doesn't still reproduce the problem, now add things back in one by one until you can get to the point of where the problem actually is. This is really useful too. Sometimes the bug is not in your code. You may have found a bug in a package or in Laravel or in PHP, but like being able to simplify the problem could also help you if you're going to ask for help and try to open a bug ticket somewhere else too. So multiple benefits of this one. Let's look at our second bug. Now, maybe you're like me. I don't even never use this ZeroMQ thing. It's a message brokering platform. That's not the important bit. But what is happening here, this particular bug a developer was having, is he was using a Laravel package in his app that relied on ZeroMQ. And part of the getting started, the README, said put this line of code in your app service provider to register this package so it gets invoked on the requests that need it. And when he did that, every single request to the application just failed. And didn't even fail with an error message. It was just spinning. Nothing was happening. And he knew it was this package because if he took that line of code out, all the problems went away. But what do you think was happening? Nothing, no visible errors, nothing in the logs. That's kind of like the second place I would go to. And a pretty clear connection between the one line of code and it hanging, removing that, and everything works. So initially, he came to me, and he was asking all these specific questions about, package auto-discovery, and how do things get registered, and how do you debug that? And I took a step back, and I said, is it really this package? And what I mean by that, this package had dependencies. So under the hood, it depended on a Laravel ZeroMQ package, which lets Laravel apps talk to ZeroMQ hosts. So I said, what if we took your package out of the picture? We're not going to register it in the app service provider. What if we just did like the basic README example in that package? Like, what would happen? We got an error. Like, that's progress, right? Sometimes you're so stuck on something that just seeing an error feels like progress. Now, this particular error didn't really lead us to a solution. So we kind of noodled on this for a few minutes. And I said, well, what if we just take Laravel, PHP, your application, take it out of the picture altogether? Like, can you open up in your terminal? Is there a way to just connect to this ZeroMQ directly? And when we tried that, now we got a helpful error message that said some particular folder had the wrong permissions and it couldn't write to it. So like, that was easy to fix, right? One command, everything was working. But there's a lesson to learn from this that applies outside of this particular package and that particular ZeroMQ host, which is eliminate layers of abstraction. Like, part of why Laravel is so productive is because we have all these quick, easy ways to build things, packages built on top of packages, tons of code reuse. It's wonderful. It's extremely productive. But when you run into a problem, especially if you're not getting useful information, strip a little bit of that away. Kind of know how to go down a layer and maybe down a second layer until you get a useful error message. In a perfect world, that file system error would have bubbled all the way up to our application, right? So instead of seeing just a white screen, things timing out, it would have told us, oh, your file system needs this permission. We don't live in a perfect world, though. So this is a useful technique. I can't say I was helping somebody else with this one. This was a personal bug. It's kind of a stupid bug. I caused it by copying and pasting. There's a lot of lessons to learn from this one. But it was a very simple feature, just creating a user record, right? And so I was writing the test, as I tend to do, and I was actually testing validation logic. And it was so simple, but it wasn't working. So here's part of that form request. This is about as simple as it gets, right? A first name field, a last name field. In fact, I was only trying to test that the field is required. Like, this is the most basic validation rule. What did the test look like? I'm sorry it's not past Nuno. This is PHP unit. I know, it's kind of gross, it's ugly, but it works. That's not the problem. Anyways, I have an empty payload. I have my route, users.store, and I'm just asserting, hey, I get some validation errors back. And this is how my test was failing. It was a failure saying you don't have any errors, which in my case is not what I wanted. I was expecting I'm going to get a validation error that says it's required. I'm sending an empty payload. It has to fail this most basic rule. So the first thing I thought, maybe I just didn't put the right form request in this controller action. Like, that happens. Nope, that wasn't it. So I'm kind of stumped a little bit. And then I see this. Is anything jumping out to you? I'm making a GET request, not a POST request. I'm making a GET request. This was the bug. And again, this is where copy pasting comes in. I probably copied this code from earlier in the test file. I changed the route name, I changed the payload, I changed the messages, but I didn't change GET to POST. Now, when I showed this to somebody, and kind of running through this talk a little bit, they said, Joel, I think you're explaining this wrong, because if you had done this the way you're describing it, you'd get like an HTTP 405 error, method not allowed. You can't just get an endpoint that's a post. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure this is what happened. I was frustrated for like 10 minutes. So in case you're wondering that same thing, here's what's going on. The route list shows that both index and store use the same URL. It's just admin/users. The only difference between them is which method I'm calling. So in this case, it was just kind of a dumb, stupid mistake, but get actually did resolve, but it resolved to the index method in my controller. There is form request there, but all the fields are optional, right? It's things like sorting the list or filtering the list or searching for a value. All of them are optional. You can pass an empty payload to users.index and get a list of users. So dumb mistake, but what's the takeaway principle? I call this one be a human code interpreter. And it's kind of like just slowing down a little bit. My eyes were so focused on the payload was empty. I was using this route. I was supposed to get this error. I just skipped over like actually the most important part, which is I was calling the wrong method. My eye wasn't going, line by line, token by token, like thinking about this like PHP is going to think about it, and I missed the most important detail. Now this happens with copy-pasted code, because again, your mind is kind of in this mindset. I would say this principle also applies if you're like using something like ChatGPT, where it's like, yep, that looks like pretty good. That's like the right shape of the solution I'm looking for. But really slow down, especially when things aren't working as expected, and be that human code interpreter. All right, let's look at our last bug. This is a sort of a riddle. When is a CSV file not a CSV file? This one, again, I ran into it personally. I probably wasted half a day on this one. I mean, it made for a good talk today, so I got something out of it. But if I was making a video game about debugging, this guy would be the final boss, because it like made my head hurt. So let's talk about the feature. This is the feature we were building. Super simple, upload a CSV file, bulk import some data. And to be helpful, we even give you a little download CSV template. There's like 10, 11 different columns. You can trying to describe that to somebody. Just download this template, make a change, upload your data, you're good to go. So I'm on a phone call or Zoom call with the client, and I'm demonstrating this. So I do that. I download the file. I just upload it. I didn't make any changes to it. And everything worked great. And then the client said, hey, could you open that file up? I want to see something. And there was one column. It was like a type column. And he said, like, what if we changed, there's two types, an A or an E. What if we changed that A to an E? Would it still work the way that I expect it to work? Okay, sure. I had tested that before. Changed it. Now, granted, this is the file I just uploaded. It just worked. And I got this. On a live demo with the client, trying to show them something that we're going to launch the next day. I could not figure this out on the call. I just kind of moved on to the next thing, swept it under the rug. I said, I'll figure it out. So after that call was over, I'm trying to reproduce this. And I actually got it to the point where I could take that file, download it, the working file. All I had to do was open it up, make no changes, just resave it, and I would get this error. So what on earth is happening here? Now, we have talked about this on the podcast, so maybe you know the answer. But if you don't, I'm pretty confident you're not going to think of what it was. Like this, maybe there's a genius out there that knows what this is. But here's what was happening. First things first, I said, well, I'm on a Mac. It's opening this CSV file in Numbers. Maybe Numbers is dumb. Let me try Excel, right? Like that's a more spreadsheety program. No, still did it. Then I thought, well, there has to be a difference between these files. So just the process of resaving it is doing something. I just don't know what that something is. So I opened it in a tool called Beyond Compare. It's kind of a nerdy, super detailed diffing tool that I love. And it's super handy because it'll even see, oh, this is a CSV file. I'm not going to give you just a text diff. I'm going to show you like rows and columns. And so first of all, I thought, come on, Beyond Compare knows this is a CSV file. Why doesn't my validation rule know that? But it said same. They're the same thing. All right, it has a different mode. I could force it out of this helpful CSV mode into a text mode. And now here I got my first clue. Now it did say they're the same, which is a little disheartening, but it's showing the file on the left, this is the file that's working, has Unix line endings. The file on the right, the file that's not working, has PC line endings. So I'm like, like that shouldn't matter for a CSV file, but at least I've identified a difference. Then I went super geeky, and I said, show me a hex diff, like byte by byte. The same tool can show this to me. And again, it's highlighting the line ending differences. But notice this. The file that works has a trailing line ending. So there's my header row, there's 2 rows of data, but the one that works has a trailing line ending. The one that doesn't work does not. So that app was stripping out that trailing line ending. Why does that matter again? Like, why does that break the ability to validate this as a CSV file? So I got out even more powerful tools. Xdebug. Laravel crowd, anybody? Like, I don't reach for it myself a lot. I like DD, I like Ray, I like things like that. But in this case, I was getting nowhere with those tools. So I did a step debug through this request. And under the hood, the MIME type validation rule in Laravel uses a Symfony component called MIME Guesser. And there's different implementations it has, but one of them uses, and in fact the default one, uses a PHP extension called file info. Now, I can't step from Xdebug, PHP land, into like PHP source code. So now I had to like go to GitHub and look at PHP source code, which I don't find myself doing a lot, but I was gonna figure this out. So I'm like in the file info extension, I'm trying to figure out where things are. I see, you know what? It's using a C library called libmagic. So I'm looking at the source code for that. Buried in there is a rule, arbitrary rule, but it's probably been there for 40 years, I don't know, that in order to be counted as a CSV file, it has to have 3 lines of data. So all the formatting can be identical. If you only have 2 rows of data, it's not a CSV file as far as libmagic is concerned, which means it's not a CSV file as far as Laravel is concerned. So that trailing line ending, all it was doing for me was giving me like a 3rd empty row of data, which satisfied that C library. So my goodness, on the one hand, I felt victorious that I figured this out, like I had dove deep enough to get to the bottom of it, but I also closed my computer and just went outside for the day after this because it was like too much. I just needed a little bit of time away from the computer. So what's the principle here? First of all, don't be afraid to dive deep. Like, in this case, I could have quit, and I could have said, well, let's just like slap a trailing line ending on every file. I guess that'll fix it. I don't know. But being able to go that level deeper, it is a confidence boost. Because even though maybe I won some battle scars by doing this, I now know intimately how that validation rule works and how the things it relies on work. It's probably not going to be super useful information, but you don't know when things will be useful in the future. So there was a benefit to this exercise that at least I felt like, hey, I figured this out. I can figure other things out in the future. Another principle is to use all the available tools you have. So like even numbers versus Excel, having a tool like Beyond Compare that can diff things in different formats, using Xdebug when you need to, in addition to some of the other tools we use on a more regular basis. Having a variety of tools in your toolbox can help you to get unstuck. And then I always have to pair it with this, don't be afraid to dive deep, but also know where to stop. Like, I wasn't gonna submit a patch to the C library or to PHP source code. Like, I wasn't gonna fix this problem with code where I thought the problem existed. I wasn't going to change the behavior. So there was a reasonable spot to kind of be like, all right, I've learned enough, I can move on with my day. So how did we fix this? Well, first of all, we just added some help text, And in reality, like if a person is using a bulk import feature, I hope they have at least 3 data rows, because otherwise it seems like kind of a waste of a feature. Then we did a custom validation error. So this message shows, which again, it's the same MIME type CSV failure, but we're just, again, including that information, like you gotta have at least 3 data rows. And then of course, we updated our template to actually have 3 rows of data so that I never got burned again by like downloading it, just resaving it, and everything breaks. Final boss defeated. It felt pretty good. So let's recap a little bit. We have these 8 key principles we ran through. I break them down into two buckets. There's no like special order these things go in. You kind of have to mix and match. But just to recap, we have formatting, reading the whole error message. Don't be afraid to dive deep. Use all your tools. And then on the other side, kind of reframing, refining the problem. Simplify it if you can. Get rid of layers of abstraction. Be that human code interpreter, like really analyze things. And then, of course, know where to stop. Know your limitations. Know when enough is enough. And all of these techniques must be paired with the crucial skill to know when to ask for help. Now, it's good to show initiative, to not just like throw up your hands the first moment you're stuck and ask somebody else for help. But don't take it too far. Don't burn hours or days on something where a 5-minute conversation with a colleague might unlock some insight and get you on the right path to the answer. So related to this, I want to give you some homework. And I put, actually try this. It's not dumb. I promise it's not dumb. It might sound dumb when I say it. But when you get to that point where you need to ask for help, write out what's going on. What's the error I'm getting? How can I reproduce it? What are some of the things I tried? Like, what do I think might be going on? What are my working theories? You don't have to write a book, maybe a paragraph or two, and then give that to the person you're going to ask for help. Now, that does two things. First of all, it's going to give the person you're asking for help the context, so they don't have to tease all this information out of you with 8 or 10 more questions. It's going to be more efficient. But it's going to be even more efficient because I would say about 50% of the time, writing things out, formulating your thoughts, you'll have an insight yourself. Like, oh, actually, let me try this. And now you've solved it. Like the rubber duck effect, as it's known, is a real thing that happens. So take this step, write it out, and you might not even have to ask for help. I also like to try to reframe things in a way to make it more fun. So I love Professor Layton. Any Professor Layton fans? I see one person. All right, I'm happy. That's all I need. If you're playing Professor Layton, which is a puzzle game, and every single puzzle, you just immediately solved it, that'd be like the world's most boring puzzle game, right? So the act of being stuck and then getting unstuck is actually the point of the game. It's like fun. Plus there's like nice animation and story and music and all that. But anyways, like the idea of solving a puzzle is going from that frustrated to that victorious state. So next time you're dealing with that thorny bug, be like, all right, we're playing some Professor Layton. This is kind of fun. I get to solve a puzzle. Now it's easier said than done because when you're frustrated, your emotions are elevated. It can be hard to get into this mindset. But a pro tip, like go on YouTube and just play a 1-hour loop of the Professor Layton soundtrack while you're debugging. Problem solved. And so one other thing I just want to add, if you're stuck on something right now, come find me. Let's pair. Let's talk about it. Or if you have a story of your own, some nasty bug that you figured out, I'd love to hear it. I went through 4 stories, but with everybody here, there's probably like 4,000 stories we could share. So please come find me later. I'd love to hear about it from you. And then when, not if, when you get stuck in the future, reach out to me. Like, I like doing this. It's kind of fun. It's a muscle I've been developing. It's what inspired this talk. And so it's not an imposition. I actually like doing this. Ask me for help. We even threw together a landing page, Get Unstuck. This is a service we offer. It's a paid service, but we do like several slots a month for free for the Laravel community because you all are so awesome. So, if you ever really get stuck and you don't have a teammate to lean on, come find this page, scroll down the free ones at the bottom, and we'd be happy to help. So I'll just finish by saying this. I've never met a developer that has never gotten stuck. Like, it happens to all of us. It certainly happens to me. And I joked about like the landscaping thing, but in the moment, it can feel super frustrating and it can be super demoralizing. But I just want to encourage you, like, this is part of the process. Getting stuck, getting unstuck is something that you just want to get better at. And, secret, it can actually be fun if you think about it in the right ways. Figuring out weird problems can become a superpower, and it can actually make you be more confident in your overall skills. You can become the go-to person on your team to solve these weird issues. So give these principles a try when you get back to your work. Let me know how it goes, and remember I'm here to help. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
All right. Great job. All right, I have one question for you. You mentioned don't be afraid to like dive deep. How do you know when you're diving deep and when you're spinning your wheels?
It's a very fine line. I kind of put it in the context too of what am I trying to accomplish.
Okay.
Like if I have a deadline and I have a workaround, then use that and maybe come back to it later, or even come back to it the next day with just a fresh mind. But yeah, there's a fine line between like I'm being stubborn, I'm gonna like get to the bottom of this, and like there's benefit to this. So I don't have like a hard and fast rule, but you kind of have to know yourself and like what the situation calls for.
And then for you, when you do figure out you're spinning your wheels, what do you do to like recalibrate or reset so that you can go back to investigating CSVs? But how do you like reset out of the spinning the wheels phase?
You mean where I didn't solve it yet?
Yeah, where you haven't solved it, but you feel like, I'm not making progress here. What do you personally do?
Honestly, go for a walk. Like, I live on a little subdivision. It's a 3/4 mile walk. And it's amazing how many times I will be stuck, frustrated. I'll go take like a 10-minute lap around the neighborhood and like everything makes sense again. So yeah, just get away from the computer.
That does seem like the universal solution.
It is. It really
All right,
is.
y'all give it up for Joel.
Thank
you very much.